Good evening. I'd like to call the December 7, 2020 school board meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Here.
Mr. Hart?
Here.
Mrs. Casper? I know I saw her.
She is here.
She is here. Okay.
Let's check and make sure we have. Okay.
Dr. Kennedy?
Here.
Mrs. Cocker? Saw her. Mr. Martin?
Here.
Mr. McCray?
Here.
Mr. Negrini?
Here.
Mr. Schneider?
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Please stand for the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance. Mrs. Carroll, do we have any public participation on agenda items?
No, we do not.
Okay, Mr. Moravich, is there anything you'd like to say? Seems like they're all muted.
I know. I'm text. They may not hear us.
Steph, can you hear us?
No, she can't hear. They can't hear us.
Okay.
Somebody talk now. Can you hear us now?
Steph, everyone? All right, great. Mr. Moravich, we do not have any public participation on agenda items. Is there anything you'd like to say about the board meeting? I still can't. Can anyone, is he on the screen? Steph, you can hear us? No, she can't.
She can hear us.
Oh, she can't, okay. John, can you hear us? Yes. Lupe? All right. John, is there anything you'd like to add? We do not have public participation on agenda items. Okay. Tonight we have a presentation on COVID-19 and how it impacts the school and our decision to be in person, remote, or virtual. So Dr. Haley, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, President Hart, and members of the board. It's our privilege this evening to share with you some information regarding the recent guidance that we received from the Pennsylvania Department of Education, the Department of Health, and some changes that have occurred as a result of new information that's been shared. So the goals of the presentation this evening are, there are 5 goals. First and foremost, I wanted to kind of start the presentation out this evening, and it's going to be a joint effort. I'm going to start the presentation out and talk a little bit about the Pennsylvania Department of Education attestation agreement requirements. On November 24th, 2020, the governor of the Commonwealth, Governor Wolf, issued an executive order which required us to attest regarding our health and safety protocols. And really the relevant information, I think, is first and foremost, the requirement for this attestation was obviously issued through executive order at 12:01 on November 24th of 2020. The state determined a timeline, a deadline for when the attestation form had to be returned to the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and that date was November 30th by 5 p.m. So basically, it came in the form of new guidance and new protocols that fundamentally changed how the Commonwealth is looking at the issue of community transmission. First and foremost, it identified 3 criteria: low, moderate, and substantial. And the item that we had to attest to was very simple. It was, if you are a county in the substantial category, of which there are, I think at present time, 67 of those counties, you had to agree, if you were going to continue with your local control, decisions of the board, to offer any sort of in-person instruction. You had to agree to the protocols established and the guidelines established that will be shared this evening by Dr. Hoffert. And those guidelines reset the metrics on the transition to remote learning. I think one key piece of this is, as a board, the board made a decision at our last meeting to continue with extracurricular activities for the winter and spring seasons. Fundamental to this executive order is the fact that if you did not sign the attestation form by November 30th at 5 p.m., you were required, mandated, to move to a virtual format, and you were also mandated that by not signing this particular document, you would not be able to offer any form of extracurricular activities until your county moved from the substantial category back to the moderate category. So what that meant for the Wilson School District was, given the board direction, I talked with Mr. Hart, who was also required to sign the attestation. We signed the attestation and submitted it to the appropriate department at PDE within the within the required deadline, indicating that we were offering in-person instruction in our elementary schools, K-5, 5 days a week, and a hybrid model, 6 through 12. So based on that attestation, we're very excited to share with you the requirements of the new PDE closure metrics. And again, those metrics reset any previous metrics that we were discussing in our health and safety plan. And we have updated our health and safety plan to include these new requirements. We're going to share with you this evening the benefits of in-person learning and some things that we have gleaned from analyzing our elementary and secondary schools. We're going to discuss the student academic and social struggles that we've encountered during this pandemic. And then finally, we will conclude with communication strategies to inform staff, students, and the community. So at this time, I'd like to ask Dr. Hoffert to come to the podium and walk us through the metrics that came as a result of the attestation form.
Thank you, Dr. Fadley. I'm not sure that excited is the word that I would use to describe any of this, but I get it. I appreciate the enthusiasm. I really do. Yeah, so we, over the weekend and really over the last few days, we've been receiving some updates and some continuous changes, even through the weekend, to some of the metrics and some of the protocols that we're using. Everything from the numbers that we'll use to determine if we need to do a short-term closure to the actual amount of time that a quarantine is required, or the number of days that are required for a quarantine now has also changed. So we've been consistently trying to keep this updated on our website, and we're consistently pushing out communications to try to keep our community updated on some of these changes. But I do know that as far as even the quarantines go, the contact tracing nurses from the Department of Health are already using the new guidelines for quarantining, even though that just came out on Friday. So that things are changing rapidly, and we're just trying to keep up as we go. As far as the dashboard, the dashboard that we have linked on our website that we keep track of, this is our current reported data. We kind of realigned it a little bit to follow exactly what the Department of Health and Pennsylvania Department of Education criteria are for these short-term closings. So the numbers that we're reporting on the website now line up in a much more clear way with the expectations on the Department of Education website when it comes to preparing for those short-term closures. So the dashboard, if you've been on it before, you'll notice we kind of took out the percentages that we were reporting before. That wasn't really data that was meaningful, and actually they've removed any percentage reference from all the tables at this point. They're looking at straight numbers now, so we just kind of took that out. And what we are going to put in the center there, anytime we need to go to a short-term closure, we'll list it there, because what that has the result on our data of doing is it actually wipes out any of those active cases and restarts from zero for that building once we have that short-term closure and come back. So what we'll do is we'll be able to track each time, each time there's a building that's had to have a short-term closure, we'll track it on the site here and show the current data for the current period that we're looking at. So Karen, if you want to jump back to the original slide. The guidelines that the state put out do utilize that rolling 14-day period. That has not changed despite the fact that the quarantine timeline has been shortened now. So we'll be using that, and our dashboard follows that same 14-day rolling format. When we are including cases on the dashboard, there are a couple criteria to keep in mind. Number one, we're only reporting a confirmed or probable case. So confirmed with a test, or probable case meaning diagnosed by a doctor, even if there necessarily wasn't a test, but a diagnosis of COVID-19. And then we're only reporting those that are students or staff who were physically present in the school building during that infectious period, which is defined as that 48-hour period prior to the onset of symptoms or prior to the test date if it's an asymptomatic individual. So that's really important because over the Thanksgiving break, we know we've gotten reports of a number of families that are saying that they have a child that's tested positive, or a family member or a staff member maybe that's tested positive, but because our buildings were closed for that extended period of time, they were not physically in our buildings during that infectious period, that 48 hours prior to their positive result. And so they would not get reported on the dashboard and would not be included in data that might lead to a short-term closure. So that's really important to point out, and that's a criteria that the state has published in their FAQ underneath the charts that we'll examine in a second. And that's a criteria that we'll continue to use and report on the dashboard. So there may be questions that come up about, I know that this family has a couple of positives, I know that this family has a couple of positives, but I'm not seeing those numbers on the dashboard. That's why, because we're only reporting on the dashboard those cases that may have resulted in a potential exposure within one of our buildings, and that's what we're tracking. The next thing, just to point out again, that case count will reset following short-term closure. So if we reach the threshold and need to close a building down for that 3 to 5 day period, could be shorter depending on our ability to contact trace and to get the cleaning done. When we come back, that number is zeroed out at that point because the expectation is that we've identified any potential contacts, we've identified exposures, those folks are quarantining, we've cleaned the building, we're resetting, coming back, and we're starting over again from zero. And that's explained in the FAQ on the Department of Education website as well. And then it's also important to note that according to the Department of Education, a short-term closure results in a shift to remote learning for all students in the impacted building. That means all students. That's inclusive of our low-incidence special education classrooms, which was not the case for the virtual or the remote week that we just completed. When we have a short-term closure, that 3 to 5 day window, according to the state, again, it's on the FAQ, the expectation is that all students are out of the building for that short-term closure and engaging in remote activities. So I want to be really clear about that. I know there have been quite a few questions about that as well. There's a link here on this slide. Hopefully it's active in the one that you guys have a copy of, but that goes directly to the FAQ section on the Department of Ed website. And this is where all of those questions are answered. All the definitions are given. It talks about what the resetting. It talks about what defines a contact. It talks about when the thresholds are met, what happens. It talks about how we determine the size of our building. So this is important as well. So Karen, if you want to jump back to the second slide. So this is a summary chart. I basically took the 3 different charts for 3 different building sizes from the Department of Ed's website and kind of collapsed them into just the ones that would apply to us. One of the recent changes, and really it's a clarification that they put onto the website, is that the building size is determined by the total enrollment of students in a building were it not for the pandemic. So what's our building enrollment that we would start with if there was no pandemic? This is how many students are enrolled in that building. So using that metric or that measurement for each of those buildings, all of our elementary schools and middle schools fall into the medium category, that 500 to 900 range, and our high school would be in that greater than 900 range, the large size building. So those are the metrics that we'd be looking at, and the action steps I have listed there as well. So in the case of 1 to 3 students in our medium buildings or 1 to 5 students in our large buildings, you can see there what the action steps would be. That would not require a short-term closure at the time. It would require that we consider altering our schedule, hybrid schedule. We're already doing that. Clean areas where the positive case may have spent time, and then utilize our public health staff to direct close contacts to quarantine. So if you look at the second column, this would be for a medium building. If we have 4 to 6 positive cases within that 14-day rolling period, or in a large building, 6 to 10, then we would need to consider closing schools for a short amount of time, 3 to 7 days, in order to clean, complete contact tracing, and to allow our public health staff to contact potential close contacts in order to quarantine. The caveat here is the reason there's 2 stars there. That should actually be 3 stars, but if case investigations, contact tracing, and cleaning and disinfecting can be accomplished in a faster time frame, we can come back sooner. So it says 3 to 7, it says 14 in the next column, but if we're able to complete all those steps, get the building cleaned, isolate those folks that need to be quarantined, we can come back sooner than that. So that's really important to know as well. There's a little bit of flexibility there. Yes, sir.
I understand the flexibility in the days.
Yeah.
Why the flexibility in the student staff count? Like the 4 to 6 there?
I took that right off. That's.
No, I understand that, but
Yeah.
why did,
I mean, we're going to use 4 and 6 as our threshold for those.
Right.
But I think, I think they just wanted to publish a range.
Okay.
I honestly don't know. I mean, the smaller number is the threshold, and there's another number for the next threshold, and it just makes sense that anything in between there. Because we could have multiple cases that come in one day.
right.
So if it doesn't reach that number. That's the other thing I wanted to mention. According to the guidelines, these are independent cases from independent households. So a pair of siblings that are reported to both be positive would count as one case when it goes into the numbers. So one household counts as one case, and that's what we'd be adding up as we track the cases.
While you were interrupting, is there going to be a place where we're actually going to keep all the cases? Because this is very misleading to the public. And PD really, they're not doing a service to the public right now, because you could have 15 kids positive in 5 different classrooms, but it only counts if there's 5 siblings in the class, it only counts as 3 cases. If there's if there's 5 kids in the family, you could have 15 kids that are sick, and it only counts as 3 cases because they're all related.
But you'd have to have 3 families with 5 kids
Yeah.
each that are all positive.
Totally possible.
I guess it could be.
But what I'm saying is, it's misleading because it doesn't give a true picture of how many of our kids truly, or our staff are truly infected, especially if we wipe off these cases.
We run lists. I mean, we have a running list of any family that's reported to us that's positive, even if they're, in or out of the school, and that needs to quarantine as a result of that. That's just not something that's needed for the metric in order to determine that a short-term closing has to happen.
I think PD is just ridiculous. I mean, nothing ever good comes out of PD, and this is a good example of it.
Well, I have to say, this is probably the most clear directive we've had for the pandemic so far, so I enjoy black and white.
I mean, we don't even have a director of PD right now. We're like,
Right.
Acting.
A question for you.
Yes, sir.
On the, why is the 14 days, I'm looking at the 14-day period with the 7+ students. It's 14 days to clean everything out, but it only takes 3 to 7 days. I guess I'm not getting the connection between why it takes 7 more days at the max to get that.
Yeah, I think, and I'm just kind of inferring what PD and the Department of Health were intending, but I think that's less about the physical cleaning of the building and more about the number of cases that need to be contact traced
Oh, okay.
identified within that time period. So again, if we can do it faster and identify all those potential cases, then we can come back sooner.
And what about the 10 days that just came out like a week or so ago?
So that's the quarantine timeline.
Right.
And the new changes say, in the past, anyone who's potentially exposed was quarantining for a full 14 days. Now what they've come out and said is that they can end that quarantine after 10 days, so long as they're completely asymptomatic during that period, and they're not using any kind of fever-reducing medication. The other thing that they've changed is that if an individual goes for a test after the 5th day following exposure, gets a negative test, then their quarantine period can end after 7 days. And that's a big change. It was not the case that you could get a negative test and end your quarantine early, but that has changed. And what they're saying is that while the incubation period for the virus has not changed, it's still 14 days, and they still recommend tracing and identifying symptoms for the full 14-day period. The vast majority of cases develop within that 10-day period, so they're looking for more compliance with the quarantines, which is why they're allowing it to be shortened. So, and we've already been using the 10-day timeline. We talked with our nurses this morning, and we've been issuing some changes in guidance based on the new criteria, mainly because the contact tracing nurses are already using it as well from the Department of Health.
Are we able to access the rapid testing?
So that comes down to an individual's physician, their choice in doctor, and where they go to get the test. I know there are some pediatricians that are offering the rapid tests, but as a school district, we are not in a position to offer, our own testing or to conduct our own testing on site. So it just comes down to where, we've been sending folks up to the St. Luke's Clinic up in Hamburg. They seem to have a pretty quick turnaround. I know there's a couple of pediatricians locally that are using rapid tests, but it just comes down to, the family's decision about where they go for their test.
I just understand that there is some, I guess, a lot of the testing locations are a little overwhelmed right now, and some people are being sent outside of the county to get testing done as well, or outside of the area. Just wondering what the turnaround time is.
It really varies. We've seen anywhere from, immediate rapid tests to a full week for turnaround, which is sort of the frustrating part of all of this. The other thing I will say,
Dr. Hubbard.
one other change, sorry, I don't know who's speaking, didn't mean to interrupt, but
Okay.
one other change that we've made in how we're tracking data on the dashboard is we're reporting the cases on the actual symptom onset date or the date of the positive test, because that's truly when the countdown starts as far as quarantining and possible isolation. In the past, when we got cases, because tests were coming in at a varied amount of time, different lengths of time, we would maybe receive the results of a test a week after it was given, and we would be reporting on the day that we received it. And by that time, if a student was positive, 3 days from then, they could actually come back to school. So it didn't make sense. So what we've kind of shifted since Thanksgiving, that when we receive news of a case, we're actually reporting it on the dashboard on the date of the symptom onset or the test date. So if they're asymptomatic, they went to get a test, the date that they took the test that resulted in a positive. So that will give us a better picture of what the actual number of active cases are in each of the buildings.
Dr. Howard, you said that they could come back after 10 days if they were symptom-free. But some of the people I talked to have had it, they've had like the lingering cough.
Yeah.
Which doctors have told them could be 3 to 5 weeks till
Yeah.
that goes, even though they're no longer a contagion threat. Does that mean they would still be in that 14-day window?
The criteria, well, the 10-day quarantine for an exposure can only be reduced to 10 days if they're completely asymptomatic and never develop a positive. So that's just the quarantine. The return to school following an actual positive test is dependent on, first, doctor's recommendation. I mean, we're not the medical professionals. We're going to let the doctor give us that. But the 10-day isolation period asks for not only the 10 days after a positive test, but also for 24 hours symptom-free, and it says an improvement in respiratory symptoms. So there's some criteria there when it comes to that.
Dr. Hoffer, sorry, I apologize if this was already covered, but what's the reasoning behind the building sizes being determined by the total number of students that would be attending rather than students that we actually have attending day to day?
That's the PDE criteria that they listed on the website when they gave us the update for these metrics. And they bulleted out, because I guess in the question and answer section, there was a question about how to determine building sizes, and it spells it out pretty clearly that we're using the enrollment were it not for the pandemic. I think that's the actual quote.
So hypothetically, if my child does not attend the school and they are positive, like they're full remote, but they come back with a positive test, would that then factor into the 4 to 6 students in the same school building?
No, it would not unless they were physically present in the building.
So, but their number is counted in the denominator of the total for the building?
Well, it's not really a denominator because we're doing a count, we're not doing a percentage. The only reason for the count of students was to determine which size building and category we're working through. There's no more, and that's kind of why we took the percentages off the dashboard, because there is no more calculation of a percentage of students and staff.
Thank you.
Yep.
Dr. Hopper, you talked a bit about the shortage of substitute teachers and the expense of that. And is there any financial advantage, or has there been discussion of doing rapid tests for any teachers or staff, key members, staff members that are quarantining, so they could be in the...
That's a great question. I don't know what the cost factor, I don't even know the availability if a school district would be able to secure rapid tests. That's not something we've necessarily explored.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something you might consider exploring? I mean, I don't know if
We're willing to consider anything, I think.
Okay.
So basically, because we're only counting the kids that are in the building, if 3 students get sick, and then that building shuts down, and 2 or 5 or 10 other kids in that class get sick as well, no one will ever know that, because we're going to shut down the building for 3 to 5 days and restart the clock.
Well, and those students would then be quarantined as a result of the positive contact.
Yeah, but no one's ever going to know that, because it's not
Well,
on
the
the
families that
dashboard.
kids are staying home would know that,
Well, I know
absolutely.
that. Yeah.
I'm only 1/4 of this presentation, so if there are other questions, I'll happily jump out and let Dr. Chirka take over. Thank you.
Yep, we got it, Mr. Martin. Thank you, Dr. Hoffert. Just want to take an opportunity to thank Andy. He works tirelessly to respond to the ever-changing scenarios that we're presented with as a district, and to echo the fact that this really is the most clear metrics and the most clear directive that we have been provided as a team since March. So as a team of folks who advise you and work with you directly and try to lead our district and our community, we're very thankful for this guidance. I also want to preface this part of the presentation just as we shift into how our students are doing in the environments that we have. I want to start by saying that we have students that are successful in all environments. We have very successful students in our hybrid mode of teaching and learning. We have very successful students in our fully virtual program. And we also have very successful students in the remote learning piece. However, in analyzing that data throughout what's now almost half of the school year, we've seen that there are definitely trends. And we do have a disproportionate amount of students who are struggling more at greater levels this year than we've experienced in the past. So Stacy and I just want to talk to you a little bit about some of those pieces. We look at lots of different data points when we analyze how well students are doing, and just to kind of go in different order than what's posted, one of the most important pieces is attendance. If we can't get students to engage with our teachers, with our learning experiences, with the opportunities that we provide, we have zero chance, zero probability of helping them become successful. And attendance has been a huge challenge for us. For our students who are not physically in school, we're seeing nearly double the amount of students who are absent on a daily basis compared to their peers. So that to me is a huge concern. And we're sending people into their homes, we're trying to engage parents, we're trying to use their peers to engage the students. But it's very hard to support, to remediate, to intervene with a child who's not physically in your room. You can't reach over and work with that child or pull her to your desk to have a conference. So that's been a huge concern, something that we're working with our community and schools teams on. Our social workers, our counselors, our principals, our teachers are doing a phenomenal job just trying everything in their toolboxes to reach these children. Also looking at how we're utilizing our time, dedicating more professional learning time this year. We've made many scheduling adjustments. Those of you in here that are parents have seen some of those adjustments. We've even dedicated entire days of our calendar year trying to meet the needs of some of these children that are not engaging. And it's, again, no fault of our teachers and our principals. They're really working tirelessly trying to figure out creative solutions to get kids to engage in these experiences. And then ultimately, both of those pieces tie into the academic performance. And when we look at academics and the performance of academics mainly measured by local assessments grades, summative assessments, formative assessments in our classes, we're seeing that nearly double the number of students in our secondary schools are failing compared to this time last year. And again, that's just one indicator, but it is an important indicator. We have strong assessments in the school district. We spend a lot of time and money developing them, and they're valid and they're reliable. So that's kind of a snapshot from a secondary lens and a little bit of an elementary lens with regard to how we're trying to support the needs of some of our fully remote learners during this pandemic.
Want to make sure that we're not more than 15 minutes because it was only 4 feet, so just keeping it short. Okay, to echo what Chris said, please understand that we know that there are learners in all 3 of our modes offered that are very successful. And I think part of what helped with that success rate is the fact that we've offered choice to our families and for what works for those students that meets their individual needs. So please know that we're not saying that you can't be successful if you're remote or if you're a virtual learner, but we do know that there are some benefits of in-person learning. And in particular, I have to champion that at an elementary school level. So you can see on the slide, there are some things that we've pointed out for you to consider. Just the structure and the ability to support the learning process, as Chris had alluded to. We do have families that have the ability to support their students at home in a remote environment. People that are stay-at-home parents or people that have technology and devices and other ways to support. But there are also some families that do not have that. And it is unfortunately more than we would potentially think or like to think about. So there are some family dynamics that come into play. Socioeconomics comes into play when we're talking about kids that are successful or not successful in their endeavor in remote and virtual learning. So those are things that we have to think about. School provides routines, there are expectations, there's someone there to facilitate the processes. So we believe that those are opportunities to help steer kids on the correct path to where they're going. You've got a relationship and a connection with an adult that you may or may not have in that home environment. Some of our families are very fortunate to have that structure and their students thrive. Others do not have that opportunity. And as far as monitoring and intervention goes, you know that this year it's even harder than it was before. In our elementary schools, we had to take our interventionists and we had to take our reading specialists and we used them as a stopgap measure and had to use them to instruct children this year in a classroom setting. I just want to emphasize to the board one more time the importance of restoring those roles. We cannot go long-term without people whose specific task and job, their role, is to monitor and intervene along with and in support of the classroom teacher. We need people in those specialized roles supporting kids in that way. And then there's some other pieces that Chris and I have talked about and mentioned to you before. You know that the mental health component is there. There's a lot of research behind the importance of socialization, being with peers to maintain positive mental health, and having that adult-student relationship as well as the student-to-student relationship. And then if you have time and would like to, there are lots of different pieces of research and articles there that come from our state level, the governors, come from the CDC, and even come from the American Academy of Pediatrics, endorsing the benefits of in-person learning and how it's very important to our learners of all ages. Anything else, sir?
That's it.
Okay. Thank you. And Karen, I think you're up.
And if it's okay with you, I will stand over here. Hopefully you can hear me. So I just wanted to give you guys just a little bit of an update. Obviously, as you know, things are changing rapidly. So one of the key components to everything we've been doing this year is really communication and an ongoing communications process to make sure that our community, our staff are informed of what's going on. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update on what we've been doing to communicate all of this new information. So you're aware we sent a communication out on Saturday, providing the community and staff with an update regarding the short-term closure metrics, a lot of what Andy reviewed. We're going to be sending an updated community communication regarding the short-term closure process. Really what I did, and I'm going to show this to you really quickly, because we know that if we need to move to a short-term closure, we probably are going to have to do that very quickly, right? So it's going to be very similar to if we had like an inclement weather day. So we want to inform the community what to expect so they know and how to be prepared. So basically, this process mirrors what we do for an inclement weather closure. So basically what will happen is if we need to move to the short-term remote learning at any of our buildings, we will go through an internal process to identify that and make sure that we're all on the same page. And then we will execute a plan that's, again, very similar to what we do with the snow day. So there will be a phone call that will go out through Skylert. So it's going to be very important that we stress to our families to make sure their Skylert information is up to date, which we do on a regular basis. We communicate and ask them to do that. So they'll get the phone call that will also go to staff. So it goes to staff and families. We'll send an email out as well to all of the families in that school. And then we'll update both the district website as well as that individual school website. So that process will happen every time we would need to move to a short-term closure in any of our short-term remote setting in any of our buildings based on that metrics. So we'll be communicating that with the community so that they're aware. We'll be doing that probably as early as tomorrow, just so that they have that information. We also, hello, sorry about that. We also will be doing a more in-depth staff communication. We spent most of the day today just really thinking through what are some of the questions that our staff may have based on the communication that we've already sent out. So we're going to be doing an updated staff communication with a more in-depth FAQ that will be just really staff-related. So that will be going out tomorrow, and then we're going to be hosting 2 optional virtual calls with our staff, one at the elementary level and one at the secondary level at the end of the day tomorrow. Again, just to make sure that we can get as much information out to them as we can and hear any additional questions they may have. And then obviously, the Health and Safety Plan website is a really critical key place for our community to be visiting. All of our communications are there. We've been updating our FAQs as fast as we can as new information becomes available to us. So it's our commitment, my commitment, that we will continue, obviously, to be as transparent with communication as we can, getting information out as quickly as we can, so that everybody is kind of on the same page of where we're at as these new processes kind of evolve over time. So, Dr. Faley, I'll turn it back over to you if you have any concluding comments.
Thank you. Let me publicly thank the leadership team, because when Mr. Hart contacted me, I think it was Saturday, we talked quite frequently and said, I think the board is at a point where they need an update and information in reference to all of the things that are going on and make this challenge so difficult. What are the factors that you're considering? And we spent a great deal of time as a team talking about how to best serve our students and how to communicate and how to continue to stay ahead of the curve and do what's right by our students and our staff. So there's a lot of information that's been included in this presentation. I would encourage you to take an opportunity to read the comments in some of the literature and the research, specifically by the American Academy of Pediatrics, which is one of the links that are provided to you, because it really identifies some critical information about the importance of keeping kids in person for learning. And I know there's a fine balance to that, and we have to follow the guidance that is created, but in my conversations with some of the more urban school districts leadership, There's a huge event occurring as a result of this pandemic, and that event is the gap is widening in our school systems, and we're not immune to that. We experience that as well. Chris and Stacy alluded to the fact about the inequities that exist. There are students in our school district that don't have those supports at home, that when they're not in school, they're not engaged in school, and they're not accessing the remote learning, and that's creating some long-term effects that we're going to have to strategize how to work through as the pandemic hopefully ends at some point and we can get back to the new normal of educating our students in Wilson. But, you know, it has certainly been, since last March, I commend all of our professional staff, our support staff, our administration, because we're living this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we've been doing it for 9 months, and we're not making any complaints about it. But I really believe that the team that we have in Wilson is leading and providing the model for the county, and certainly is evident by many of the comments that we're receiving from teachers and the community members. And that's a result of this board and this board's support for us as a team. And so at that, I'll open it to any questions you might have, any further clarifications you might want to see, and turn it back over to Mr. Hart.
Thank you. Thank you to you and your team. I really appreciate that. Board members, follow-up questions? I know a lot were asked during the presentation, but is there anything else you'd like to hear or further direction you'd like to give to Dr. Fady and his team?
Mr. Hart, if I may, just to follow up on what Mr. Case had mentioned, to not only get our teachers back into the classroom sooner if there is a positive or a presumptive positive. I don't know if this has been discussed or can be discussed as we move into 2021. The idea of continuity in learning is critical, and whether or not we have the ability with our technology that if we have a teacher home that is perhaps asymptomatic, is physically able to teach, but certainly for safety reasons kept at home, whether or not that somehow we can have those teachers engaged still with our students on a daily basis. I realize that creates a number of obstacles and challenges, but I'm quite certain that many of our teachers that are home would rather be teaching, rather be in the classroom if they could. Our students would prefer to have them. No offense to Mr. Hahn or anyone else who's filled in, but I think that's critically important, especially depending upon the subject area that those teachers that are out teach. Again, hopefully those conversations have taken place, and if all parties are willing to do so, that perhaps we can bridge that gap a little bit further come 2021.
We leave that decision up to the building leaders. So if there is a teacher who is teaching a certain subject matter that can teach remotely from home while they are home because a family member is awaiting testing or a family member is positive, we have had multiple staff members that have continued to teach remotely. We then put a paraprofessional in the classroom, or sometimes it is a day-to-day sub-person that we just slide in, or another teacher gives up maybe their planning period and sits in. We do have many, many staff members that have remote talk while they're home. So we will continue to do that when we can. Absolutely.
Do they still need a sick day, or what does he kind of sick day?
No, they don't need a sick day.
Actually just did that at my school. Since Wilson was remote, my wife and I split the time at home, and my days were spent juggling the kids at home and my students. But it was interesting and unique because I got that perspective from what the kids who are at home have. from trying to zoom in that way as opposed to them zooming to me in the classroom. It's not perfect, but I think it's a system that seems to work.
But you're not saving a whole lot of money because you still need someone in that classroom. You can't not have a certified or emergency certified person in that room. That's the bummer.
Any other follow-up or questions? Thank you, Dr. Fadley and your team. Really appreciate the time you put into this. Thank you. 1.7, the board has met in executive session this evening to discuss personnel issues. Under board reorganization 2.1, need to appoint a president pro temp, and Mr. Negrini, you have agreed to do that, so I will turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. My role this evening is to seek nominations for board president and then conduct the vote on those nominations. So at this point, are there any nominations for board president?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Brad Hart for president.
Is there a second to that nomination?
I'll second that.
Are there any other nominations this evening for board president? Hearing none, then at this time, since there is only one nomination, this would be a voice vote. So all those in favor of the nomination of Brad Hart for board president, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Congratulations, Mr. Hart. The meeting is now yours again.
Thank you. I appreciate the support of the board. Thank you very much. 2.3, nomination and election of vice president. Looking for nominations.
I nominate Steph Cocker.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Dr. Kennedy, second. Any other nominations? Seeing none, this will be a voice vote. All those in favor of
Aye.
Mrs. Cocker, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Congratulations, Mrs. Cocker.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Now, it's nomination and election of the superintendent's administrative assistant to serve as the board secretary. We need a voice vote for that. Looking for a motion. Mrs. Carroll to be board secretary.
Oh, I'll nominate for Mrs. Carroll.
Dr. Kennedy, is there a second?
I'll second. Schneider.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Any other candidates? All those in favor? Say
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Congratulations, Mrs. Carroll. Looking for a nomination and election of the assistant superintendent's administrative assistant to serve as a substitute board secretary. Looking for a motion.
Cocker.
Mrs. Cocker first. Do you have a second?
Kennedy.
Dr. Kennedy. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Congratulations to both of you. 2.6. Oh, sorry, 2.5. Looking for a motion to approve the board secretary's salary to be set at $0. Looking for a motion.
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider, do we have a second?
Casper.
Mrs. Casper. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Two 2.6, request approval of the retention of John Maravich, Esquire, and Fox Rothschild LLP as solicitor for the 2021 school year. Looking for a motion?
Negrini.
Cocker.
Mr. Negrini first, Mrs. Cocker second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
It's 9 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. 2.7, looking for a motion to approve setting the solicitor's retainer fee for the 2021 school year at $10,000 with hourly rates of $190 per hour for attorney's time and $210 to $225 per hour for specialized services. This represents no change in fees and rates. Looking for a motion?
Negrini?
Mr. Negrini first, do you have a second?
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Snyder?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Thank you. 2.8, looking for a motion to request continuation of the force of present Wilson School District policies. Looking for a motion?
McCray.
Mr. McCray first, do you have a second?
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
2.9, looking for a motion to request appointment of all non-officers of the school board as assistant secretaries for the Wilson School Board of Directors. Looking for a motion? Oh, I'm sorry, I still need a motion, though. John?
John, we don't need a motion for consent, do we?
Sorry, I couldn't find it. There should be a motion in a second, but then there should be a motion.
Looking for a motion?
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider, second.
Second, please.
Mr. Case, second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The approval of minutes. 3.1, request to approve the minutes of the school board meeting held on November 16th, 2020, as attached. Looking for a motion?
So moved.
Cocker?
Mr. Martin, Mrs. Cocker, second. Any discussion?
I do have a clarification on the motion that we voted on at the end of the meeting. As proposed by Mr. Negrini, was that just for winter sports, or was that for sports until further notice?
My recollection was to further notice.
'Cause I think the minutes say just winter sports, is that correct?
Yes.
Mrs. Carroll, can you make that correction in the minutes?
Yes.
Thank you. Looking for a motion to accept the revised minutes of the meeting.
Mr. McCray?
Mr.
So
McCray
moved.
first,
Case.
second. Mr. Case?
Nope.
Any other discussion?
Good catch.
Yeah, it was. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Payment of bills, Mr. Martin.
Mr. President, I submit for approval tonight bills in the amount of $2,304,267.19.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Negrini?
Mr. Negrini, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Abstain?
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
And Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
That's 8 yes and 1 abstain.
Superintendent's report, Dr. Fadley.
Thank you, President Hart. This evening, I present the personnel and program recommendations as listed.
Looking for a motion to approve the superintendent's items 5.1 through 5.7. Mr. Case, do you have a second?
Martin?
Mr. Martin, second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
6.1, request to accept with gratitude from Nick Camacho a donation of 5 Kindles to be used in the library at Wilson West Middle School. 6.2, request approval to accept with gratitude from Mask America's Kids a donation of approximately 7,500 custom designed cloth masks with Wilson's logo, one for every student and staff member in the district. Looking for a motion to accept items 6.1 through 6.2.
Cocker?
Mrs. Cocker first, do you have a second? Mr. McCray, any discussion? Roll call, please. I'm sorry. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. 7.1 under Human Resources, request to approve the transportation first quarter August in service to November 30th, 2020, safety and attendance stipend per attached. 7.2, request to approve the employee to specialized leave under the FFCRA to ensure PSER's years of service credit is maintained. Looking for a motion to accept Human Resource items 7.1 and 7.2 as presented.
Cocker.
Mrs. Cocker first. Do you have a second?
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
And Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Student Services, 8.1, request approval of a service agreement with Dr. Kara Schmidt to perform an independent educational evaluation at a fee not to exceed $4,750 in accordance with Board Policy 113.3. 8.2, request to ratify the updated 2020-2021 school calendar to reflect the November 23rd and 24th, 2020 were half days for 6th through 12th grade, and grades 5 through 6 students had no school as attached. 8.3, request approval of a service agreement with Malvern Academy, formerly known as the Progression School, at a rate of $182 per student per day for the 2020-21 school year, beginning on August 26, 2020, and ending on June 3, 2021. Looking for a motion to approve Student Services agenda items 8.1 to 8.3 as presented. First.
Casper.
Mrs. Casper, do we have a second?
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Finance, 9.1, request approval to transfer the balance of the Multicultural Club to the Student Government account per policy number 618, Student Activity Funds. Any student activity account that has been inactive for 1 year period shall be considered disbanded. All monies remaining in the disbanded account will be transferred to the respective student body activities account of the school year, and then inactive per request of the advisor. Looking for a motion?
So moved.
Mr. Martin first, we have a second.
McCray.
Ms. McCray, any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Policies, 10.1, a second reading of the policies attached, and 10.2, a first reading of the policies attached. No action needs to be taken.
I have a question.
Yes.
On the second reading of the policy for supervision of students. And maybe this is, I don't know if this is the right forum to talk about this, but there's a clause in here, or part of the policy, that says, teachers and designated staff shall provide, well, hold on a second, for each employee is responsible to ensure that students are supervised by a teacher or other staff member at all times while engaged in district activities. It says a whole bunch of stuff about, what does that mean? If a teacher sends, a student to the library by themselves, is that supervised? And I'm just looking at the general welfare of a teacher or any district employee. When you send a student, that they are not supervised today. You could tell me they are, you could tell us they are, but if this is going to be a policy in place that someone could get technically written up for, we may need some clarification, or some rewritten here.
What we can do is provide that additional clarification in the board update, but I will tell you that the general purpose of this policy is to ensure that when students are in the classroom, that there's an adult present. So when a student is sent to the bathroom, or a student is given a pass to report to the library, or a pass to go to the bathroom, that is not the intent of this policy. This is just to clarify that we don't want our students in a classroom unattended.
Okay.
Kids being able to hang out in the hallway by themselves are not.
Well, there's cameras in hallways.
Yeah, but that's not, first of all, it's not good practice. Second of all, it's a legal issue. The kids can't be in the vegetables by themselves. They can't be in the hallways, but they have to be supervised. They can't be sending them to another room and say, work on your project here, and not be in that room with them.
What we'll do, Dr. Faley, we'll take that policy, take a look at it, look for further clarification, put it in the board update, and then next meeting, we'll add that back as a second reading, so if there's any more discussion, we can discuss it before it goes to the final reading. Is that okay?
We can always add some clarification about the transition from one place to another. That's not a problem.
Okay, great. And then likewise, too, in the elementary school, being a watchdog dad, students are sometimes there's two students right outside the door working on a little project. It happens all the time. I mean, again, unsupervised, they're right outside the door. Just, it'd be nice to have some clarity. I understand the concept of what we're trying to go for something like this, but, there's a lot to be, that needs.
Of course, I understand your questions, and we'll make sure to clarify that in the policy.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Under miscellaneous, there are no items. Committee reports, 12.1, Berks Career and Technology Center. Mrs. Casper.
There is no report for BCTC. Our next meeting is this coming Thursday, the 10th.
Okay, thank you. 12.2, Wilson Equity Task Force. Mrs. Casper.
Yes, we met on Wednesday, December the 2nd at 3 p.m. virtually. And we began our discussion around a district-wide professional development since this came up quite a bit as something that needed to be addressed at a district level. And we agreed that we would break it down into 3 sessions. And we talked mostly about the first session, but the 3 sessions, the first would be a district-wide video showcasing what the task force has been doing and some of our work around equity and social justice so far. This video would primarily capture student voices. The second session would address equity versus equality, and the third session would address how to have some of these difficult yet really crucial conversations. This will be an ongoing process, as we all felt that this needed to be a district-wide initiative. And we hope to continue to meet and assign team leaders for each session, and have kept ourselves open to bringing in outside experts for support. We hope to just get started with some of the training and then hopefully bring experts in as needed if necessary. It's pretty much all my report. Our next meeting is scheduled for January the 6th at 3 p.m.
Thank you, Mrs. Casper. 12.3, 12.4, Berks County IU and Curriculum Council. Dr. Kennedy.
Yes, we did have an IU and a curriculum meeting since the last board meeting. At the IU meeting, they talked about the Annie Sullivan Award winner, which I think as a district we're all still pretty salty about. But the winner gave a really nice thank you, and she was really thoughtful. And I thought it was interesting that it was a paraprofessional that won the Annie Sullivan Award this year. In my memory, that's the first time that's happened. But then, ironically, they also did talk about White Cane Day that was held here at Wilson with Anna Ackley as well. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight from that the BCIU does is they do a lot of advocacy for both our students, social justice-wise, but as well as they do advocacy money-wise. And that's what they do that's really good. They get, their office is so good about getting grants for early intervention, grants for the schools that need it, grants for things like well, before all this happened with the cybersecurity and all the things. And I think that oftentimes that's overlooked, but I think that is one of the strengths of DCIU that they do well, is they go out and they find the money and then they distribute it to our local children and our local school districts. For the curriculum committee, it was a long time ago. We talked, it was supposed to be a quick meeting.
Well, it was quick, and I asked a question.
It was, remember we thought it was going to end before 5? Yes, it was, we had a presentation from the library staff, right?
No, it was the STEM.
Oh, yeah, Matt Durr was there, okay. Discovery. We had the 3 Discovery teachers there, and we had social distance discovering, where we were allowed to we were allowed to build.
It was playing.
With the different kinds of materials that they use in the Discovery classes in the elementary level. And they talked about how they all have to go out into carts. And if you know anything about Discovery, it uses a lot of materials. So they are like the world's sturdiest carts that they have to use to truck everything around. And one of the things that struck me was just the joy of those 5 specialist teachers and how much they truly, truly enjoy their job, even though they're trucking like a ton of things on a cart, and how well they work together as a team. I thought that was really great. And it's such a nice beginning for our students to have that happy introduction to STEM.
Yeah, and they're teaching them some really neat stuff.
Yeah,
Really.
stuff that I did not know in
Correct.
elementary school, for sure. And then we devolved into, as we always do, theoretical questions. Talked, yeah?
Yeah,
And it was, yeah.
I still find it to be fruitful.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And it's always a great discussion. And it's one of those committees I love that you just blink and it's suddenly 45 minutes later. And I always feel smarter every time I leave the curriculum committee, so it's a good thing.
Great, thank you. Berks CIT, Mr. Schlossman.
I have no report.
Thank you. Extracurricular, Mrs. Cocker.
We have not had a meeting since the last board meeting, but our scheduled meeting it will be next Monday at noon.
Thank you. Facilities, Mr. Negrini.
Our next meeting is a week from today at 4:30 at the Operations Center.
Thank
That's
you.
my report.
Finance, Ms. Martin.
Yes, we met today at 4:30, talked about various items, some which will be coming to the board in the next meeting or so. We talked about the mercantile business tax. It's not been updated for some time, so we'll be getting a copy of the old draft, and hopefully we'll have a new one revised by then. Per capita, we talked about that once again, about some of the folks that are in nursing homes that are still paying a per capita tax. It's like a handful, but we're looking at a way of exonerating them for future. It's nickels and dime stuff. We also looked at Herbine and Company. They do our audits for the last several years, and they sent us a proposal to continue the service, so that will be on the board agenda in the future. We talked about the preliminary budget, which we'll be getting more into that in January. As you know, we extended the due date for the flat period for our taxes through November, so we don't have all the tax information in yet, but we're looking for $1 million or $2 more coming in. So come January, we hope to have good numbers, but it's not a pretty sight, and we'll get into that discussions more in January. Oh yeah, we also talked about 2 of our enterprise funds, child care and health, the food services. Child care is holding their own monetarily at this point in time. Food services is obviously struggling. Their expenses are, still high with salaries and so forth. So their reserves are going to be pretty much depleted probably by the end of this month, maybe January. So we have to look at ways of stemming those losses, and the administration is going to be looking at a plan to address those issues, and hopefully in the future we'll have something coming from them. We also then went into executive session to discuss executive items. That's it.
Thank you. Human Resources, no report. Mr. Martin, Legislative?
Well, not much happening, although this has a potential impact on our school. The governor vetoed the COVID bill that would limit the liability to businesses and potential cases arising from those businesses or cross-contamination during those businesses, as well as for schools. So maybe Jay can talk more about that, but I see no still reason why he didn't veto that. But Jay, I don't know if you can add anything.
I'm scratching my head at that decision. I don't know, and I don't have much more insight on the reasons behind it. We'll see what that will result in for businesses and schools throughout the Commonwealth. As a lawyer, you hate to say that lawyers will take advantage of any opportunity, but certainly this does leave the door open for liability, or at least defending liability for such claims as COVID. So I don't know.
Okay, that's it.
Great, thank you. Public Relations, Mrs. Troutman.
I'm doing double duty tonight since Ryan is not here, so I'll give my report from over here. So I just one brief thing. I wanted to acknowledge something that you approved as a donation earlier in the agenda. But we want to really acknowledge the donation of the 7,500 custom designed cloth masks that have the Wilson logo on them from a nonprofit organization called Mask America's Kids. The masks are going to be given to all of our students and staff starting today, and we'll also look for a way to get them to our remote students. But a lot of us are wearing them tonight. They're amazing. Actually, Dr. Hoffert worked with Dave Downey, who is the founder of this organization, who's a Wilson alumnus, and he actually worked with us to design them. So it was just a really great process. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about him because it's amazing. We have some incredible alumni here from Wilson. So Dave Downey is an inductee into the Cable Television Pioneers Class of 2012. He has been involved with the launch or growth of many successful enterprises over his 40 years of experience in cable operations, new media technologies, television advertising, and startup management. Mr. Downey still maintains a connection to Berks County through his family, and he's a proud Bulldog who can still sing all of the words to the alma mater, which he sang for Dr. Hoffert during their meeting, which is really cool. So tonight, obviously, all of you got one of these masks. We'll be sure those of you who are not in attendance tonight, we'll make sure you get one as well. So I'm encouraging you, and many of you are already wearing them with Bulldog pride, right? It's a great way for us to be safe and also be great Bulldogs out in our community. And we are acknowledging his donation through our district communications channels. It was the headliner of the Blitz this past week, and I'll be sharing it on social media as well. So again, we want to express our gratitude for this incredibly generous donation to keep our Bulldog community safe. Thank you.
Yes, the Ed Foundation did meet 2 Fridays ago, but I'm going to defer my report to the next board meeting. I missed part of the meeting due to technical issues, and I have to get some clarifications on some of the items. Thank you.
Thank you. 12.13, technology, Mr. I'm sorry.
It was our scheduled meeting, but it got postponed till the 21st. So I'll have a report at the next meeting.
Great, thank you. Student outreach, Mr. Johnny Clark.
This week, the Wilson High School students are making and sending cards to Charlotte Rowland to support her and to let her know that there is an army of supporters at Wilson cheering her on and sending positivity from West Lawn all the way to Tennessee. Mental Health Council is having a toy drive. Students can drop off gifts in their first period classes. On Saturday, December 12th, Student Government is having a fundraiser at Chipotle. Please come out and support us from 4 p.m. to 8 p.m. Minithon is having a fundraiser at Anthony's Coal-Fired Pizza on Thursday, December 10th. The club has also pushed back their scavenger hunt to December 19th. More information about the scavenger hunt can be found on their website and social media pages. Lastly, the Yoakum Institute of Arts Education is performing a Christmas Carol. The show features students from Wilson and people of all ages from the surrounding area. Tickets can be purchased on Yoakum's website for both in-person and live streams. I've had the honor of being their stage manager and working with Mrs. Beverly Hauk, who is also my internship advisor. So thank you to the Wilson School District for giving me this unique opportunity, and thank you to Mrs. Wagner and Mr. Zukanik for running the honors internship program.
Thank you. Before we move on, Mrs. Carroll, is there any participation from the public for non-agenda items?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Maravich, any comments? Mr. Maravich, can you hear us?
I'm sorry, did you call me?
Yeah, and you just, we have no public participation on non-agenda items. Do you have any comments? Take that as a no. Before you close the meeting, any further items from the board?
I thought you called on me. I apologize. You're breaking up a little bit for me. I apologize. I have no report if you're asking me.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or items before the board? Looking for a motion to adjourn? So moved. Mr. Schneider, second? Mr. McCray, thank you.